So what has really changed in almost half a century? 45 years ago today, the Soweto youth taking to the streets in protest against the apartheid government's Bantu Education policy. So where are we now, and what have we learned after all these years? And perhaps the most important question, why is it taking so long for the youth to get the recognition politically that they should? Well, one youth activist and education activist believes that Africa's political structures continue to undermine the youth's participation in political platforms, at least formally. Well, Mr. Zama Mthunzi is speaking to us this morning from Johannesburg. Zama, good morning to you. Thanks for your time. I took a chance to read your article, and you make such a good point. Let me bring viewers into your article in case they haven't seen it. And I thought it fascinating. Today we sit with an average age of 66 years in our parliament and 56 years of age in our economic sectors. The youth simply aren't involved, are they?
Definitely, and I think what we've seen is that as the years go, and we now in 45 years since the June 16 uprising, that more and more young people become excluded from society. And I think what we do to avoid this problem is to shine on the few that have made it to formal spaces like Parliament and kind of other youth developmental structures. But when you look at what's really happening in those structures, they're still highly inflated and interfered by the older generation.
So how do we try and get on top of that, though? Because the youth, as you mentioned, some making it as far as MPs. Obviously, we're thinking about people like Ronald Lamola. Obviously, we're thinking of people like Umbuyiseni Ndlozi, Julius Malema, and a few others along in other political parties as well. But still, in the end, for at least the majority of them, they are reporting in some sense or another, probably barring the EFF, they're reporting to an older structure. I think you call it the old guard. Do you think the old guard, Zama, are willing to really give the youth a voice, or are they paying the youth lip service?
I think, most of them are really obsessed with power. And what we've seen, especially in the political space, is that as soon as a young person rises and is kind of very outstanding and is able to challenge their politics, of the old regime, they seem to kind of push them down. And that's why all our youth organizations really seem to be in crisis. The Youth League has been in crisis for almost 10 years now since Julius left. And we've been seeing it being, changed, disbanded, done this. They just now re-established a national task team. And I think we've always seen how young people, when they take to the fore and saying we want to represent young people, as South African population is overwhelming of young people, and it doesn't make sense why we have so much spaces dominated by the older generation in this country. And what that does is that when old people sit and make policy and legislation, they don't see the horizon. They're sitting there, they're 66 years of age in their average, and they make decisions, and that's why policies such as the national youth policies such as the youth employment service have been stifled and are not actually making a difference to people's young people's lives.
I think one of the most significant days, and I'm not saying the most, but probably, arguably, one of the more significant days since 1976, June 16, and I'm sure you would agree with me, Zama, if you don't tell me, it would be the Fees Must Fall campaign. Not just at one university, but obviously around the country. In 1976, fighting to have Afrikaans removed as the medium of instruction. And then we fast forward to just a few years ago, because of youth unemployment, because of the cost of living, the youth unable to pay for an education. So would it be fair to say that while the youth aren't involved politically, because it seems the old guard aren't going to allow them in, they are still very much trying to fight the good fight? Or am I being too harsh?
I think what we've seen with the Fees Must Fall uprising is that the cross-political kind of alliance of young people and building a strong national movement, that they believe that they can effect change, beyond their political kind of or party lines. So that you have all these youth organizations and student organizations coming together and pushing and in conviction that they can fight for free education, they can fight against the issue of institutional racism in our universities. And I think that's the movement that is really you can liken to the June 1676 generation, that young people coming together, even though they were liberation movements, the ANC, the PAC, but they felt that as young people, as young students, they can come together and fight against the institutionalization of Afrikaans in Standard 5 and Form 1. So I think contemporarily we can say that Fees Must Fall for us stands in that movement. And it shows how it's a movement of a very organic crisis. So even though the uprising happened in 2015, 2016, we saw some big protests even in the beginning of this year, in 2021, in the incident of what happened in Braamfontein, and that led to the killing of Ntumba and stuff like that. That the crisis is very organic, and that we expect that young people, as they continue to be assaulted, not just politically but economically, they'll keep on wanting to access education, but they keep on being rejected by expensive high fees that they can't afford.
Just 30 seconds I've got left with you, Zama, before I say goodbye. Knowing everything we've just discussed now, what does the youth do to get more politically empowered? Let's say they had 3 years in which to get it done. What are you telling the youth? How do they get more politically empowered?
Well, basically, I mean, there's initiatives that we must institutionalize in this country. I think one of the examples I can give is that when Julius Malema was still president of the Youth League, there was a demand that they led to the ANC to say all representative structures of the party, also in parliament, must have 40% of the youth, must represent the demographics of the country. So if the country says we have a young population that's almost 50%, then people who are going to parliament must be around the demographic. So that's very important. So that's a representative structure. And what we see now in the political space, it's not a representative structure. That's first. Number two, I think there needs to be a real, a struggle to fight, especially for the developmental structure of the youth, such as the NYDA and things like that. Because even now, I think this process of choosing the board has been extended again. Because now there's fights there of the process not being fair. There's a lot of political intervention and interference that's pushing that space not to work. I mean, that organization alone has over millions of money that's meant for young people, but it's not functioning.
Zama Mthunzi, I'm going to say thank you very much. What a pleasure having you, Zama Mthunzi. And we could talk about this all day, about the solutions, but I think you've given us some practical solutions, highlighted the biggest problems as well, and hopefully the youth, if they're awake at 6:30 in the morning, have joined us for that interview. Education activist and youth activist, Mr. Zama Mthunzi, joining us here on eNCA.